People often think parties show you who a person truly is. From what I've seen, they actually reveal what people believe they can get away with. The venue Janet selected occupied the top floor of a glass tower overlooking the river. Gentle lighting, crisp white tablecloths, the sort of place where guests discuss strategy and momentum while delicately holding thin-stemmed glasses. It was a celebration for her promotion. Director now, on the fast track. Everywhere I turned, people were telling her how much she deserved it. I arrived intentionally late. Not dramatically late, just late enough that the speeches had finished and the early networking had settled into familiar rhythms. Janet noticed me near the entrance. For a brief moment, her smile faltered before she walked over. "You made it," she said, adjusting the sleeve of her jacket. Her tone wasn't exactly cold, but it wasn't especially warm either. It sounded more like someone acknowledging a detail that needed to be handled. As we moved through the room, she introduced me to a few people. "This is my husband." No name. Just a category. Most people offered polite nods. A few gave quick handshakes before turning their attention back to conversations about restructuring and quarterly growth. I didn't mind. Over the years, I'd learned how to navigate rooms where people underestimated me. It wasn't unpleasant. In certain ways, it actually made life easier. I found a seat toward the back. From there, it was easy to observe everything without becoming the center of it. Janet drifted between groups of colleagues with the confidence that comes from years of proving yourself. I remembered the days when she rehearsed presentations at our kitchen table, pacing around in socks while I listened and occasionally offered suggestions. That was before the company expanded the way it had. Before the board. Before the press. Before the narrative about me started evolving into something else. A group near my table was discussing Janet's career. "She works twice as hard as everyone else," one man said. "Especially considering everything she deals with at home," another replied. Neither of them lowered their voices. Not because they were being cruel, but because they were certain. I turned my attention toward the river beyond the windows. Eventually, the music quieted and Janet's boss stepped forward carrying a microphone. He was tall, dressed in an expensive suit, with the sort of confidence that comes from leading people who rarely challenge you publicly. His speech began the way these speeches always do. Praise. Vision. Leadership. He spoke about Janet's resilience, her work ethic, and her ability to overcome obstacles. Around the room, people nodded and raised their glasses. Then the tone shifted. "Success doesn't happen in a vacuum," he said. People leaned forward, expecting something personal. And Janet's journey has been especially impressive when you consider the lack of support she's had at home. A wave of polite laughter moved through the crowd. I remained still. Her boss continued, clearly enjoying the moment. "She never complains about it, but imagine trying to build a career while managing a household where your husband is." He smiled in my direction. "Well, a cleaner who can barely read or write." The laughter came louder this time. Not cruel laughter. Comfortable laughter. That was the part that surprised me most. Then Janet laughed too. Not loudly. Just enough. Someone called out, "That's dedication." Her boss nodded. Exactly. Janet succeeded despite that. Once again, he gestured toward me. Most people would have been held back. More laughter followed. I looked at Janet. She gave a small shrug, the kind people give when a joke grows larger than they expected. "It's true," she said. Her voice carried clearly throughout the room. "He's holding me back." Sometimes humiliation arrives like a sudden blow. This wasn't one of those moments. It felt slower. Almost clinical. Like watching something finally settle into place after quietly forming for years. For a long time, we'd kept my role private. Not exactly secret, just irrelevant to her professional life. She'd always said it was simpler that way. People treated her differently when they knew. So we allowed the story to become simpler. Then simpler again. Until apparently I had become a man pushing a mop who couldn't read. As the speech came to an end, applause filled the room. Janet's boss lifted his glass to overcoming obstacles. Everyone rose to their feet. After waiting a moment, I stood as well. Not abruptly. Just enough to draw attention when I spoke. "That's interesting," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried across the room. People turned toward me. Her boss smiled politely, assuming I was about to thank him or join in on the joke. Instead, I looked around at the executives, the department heads, and several senior leaders who had quietly arrived earlier that evening. "You mentioned the company Janet works for," I said. "I'm curious." The boss tilted his head. "Yes? Who exactly do you think owns it?" A few people chuckled softly, assuming it was another joke. I let the silence linger for several seconds. Then I answered. "Because I do." The laughter vanished. Not gradually. Instantly. Near the front of the room, two board members exchanged glances. One gave me a slight nod, the kind of acknowledgement people offer when hierarchy suddenly becomes impossible to ignore. Janet's boss blinked. I watched the exact moment understanding hit him. Recognition travels through a room faster than anger ever can. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Someone carefully lowered their glass onto a table. Janet stared at me as though she were looking at a stranger. I kept my voice calm. "I've always believed something very simple," I continued. "A company functions best when everyone inside it is treated with respect. Executives. Assistants. Cleaners. Nobody moved. Because the moment you decide someone is beneath respect," I said, "you usually stop seeing clearly." The boss opened his mouth, then thought better of it and closed it again. Several senior managers adjusted their posture, suddenly aware of exactly where they were standing. I glanced at Janet. There was no anger on her face. Only shock. The shock of realizing that a private arrangement had just unraveled in front of everyone. For years, she had constructed a version of herself that left me out of the story in any meaningful way. Tonight, that version fractured. The room stayed silent. No applause. No laughter. Somewhere behind me, a waiter shifted a tray, and the faint clink of glass sounded far louder than it should have. I picked up my coat. "Congratulations on the promotion, Janet," I said. My voice remained steady. Then I turned and walked toward the exit while the company I owned stood frozen, trying to understand the story it had just become part of.